Alrighty, I know we're just now going live and people, they may have been waiting in anticipation. We may have a few people that are just now joining us as well if they set a meeting invite for today's chat. But welcome everyone, our last day of Career Week. I can't believe it's already here. Excited to be back with everyone again. Today's topic is really going to focus on the TMF career ladder. Yes, there is a career ladder in the TMF space, despite what a lot of people may think TMF professionals do. There's a lot out there. So we're really excited to engage in this conversation today and welcome everyone back for our last session. This should be an interactive session. So what I mean by that is as you're watching our live broadcast, you will have the opportunity to ask questions, make comments, acknowledge what myself, Meredith, and Tony say. You can do that directly in the LinkedIn or YouTube videos that you're watching or wherever you're watching live from. So don't be shy about interacting. I will just say, if we're in the middle of a thought, we may finish that thought before we come to the question or the comment, but we'll do our best to get through all of them today. Depending on how much excitement we have, we know a lot of people are interested in the TMF space and really don't maybe understand what the career ladder is. So there might be a lot of passion and excitement today. If we can't get to all of the comments, we'll certainly do our best to follow up with each of those comments and questions after the fact. I know we're scheduled to go until about 11:45 Eastern together. We may go that full time. We may not. Really, it just depends on the amount of questions, comments, and engagement that we get. But nonetheless, welcome everyone. Some of you may remember me from day 2. I'm back facilitating alongside of Meredith and Tony today. But again, just to quickly recap who I am, I'm Ben Rogers. I'm our Senior Manager of TMF Education here at LMK. Excited to be back with everyone. Just to briefly go through my own career journey, since that's the topic of the hour today. I started about 13 years ago as a document reviewer. So I was hired to review paper trial master files and the documentation that was submitted. So they were meeting those legibility and pagination expectations, those Alcoa principles that we know and love. Since I started my journey, I've taken other positions that have had me developing TMF plans that have helped me or allowed me to implement eTMF platforms. I've held system administrator roles to TMF manager roles where I've been responsible for hiring individuals, for fostering relationships between CROs and sponsors. And more recently, what I've been very passionate about is TMF education. So for the last 3 years or so, I've led our TMF University offering at LMK, along with any other corporate education that we might offer for clients that are in need of better understanding the trial master file. So that's a little bit about myself. I'll hand it over to Meredith to introduce herself to the crowd today.
Thanks, Ben. Hi, everyone. I'm Meredith York. I'm a TMF Senior Project Manager with LMK. A little bit about my TMF career journey. I do have over 19 years experience in the pharmaceutical industry and in clinical research. For the past 5 years, my primary focus has been TMF. I did start with LMK as a TMF support analyst and now as a TMF Senior Project Manager. Where I work is kind of the main point of contact between LMK clients and CROs, manage TMF projects with internal and external teams. My initial exposure to the TMF was as an in-house CRA. I was working in clinical operations for a sponsor in the Boston area. We had a paper TMF. File room was in the basement, and more of exposure inventory reviews at the end of the trial. Packaged up our big boxes at the end and shipped them off to archival. So I grew in that role to a study manager, still working in TMF, and we actually had TMF roles within the department. And I've done a little work as an inspection readiness consultant, also for sponsors.
Nice. Thanks so much, Meredith. Really appreciate your background. And Tony, will you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Tony Amato. I'm a senior support TMF analyst for LMK. I've been working in pharma for about a little over 10 years. I started in rare disease, and like Meredith, I had a lot of paper TMFs. Eventually worked for a much larger sponsor than rare disease, where we had 3 vaults of paper. So the transition into eTMF was something that I was exposed to, and the first thing that I came in touch with was Viva, and it was brand new at the time in terms of companies establishing it. Today, I'm working at LMK. I do various roles supporting either my PM the indexing staff, and other peers. I honestly love helping. Teaching is one of my favorite things. And I have that opportunity here at LMK. And I kind of call it the triangle. We have indexers, QC reviewers, and your PM. And you just really can't move forward without considering all three.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Tony. And what I really appreciate is the longevity that we've had within the industry, right? And the changes that we've seen. I think we all mentioned the paper trial master files, whether you love them or hate them, there's certain reasons to love them. There's plenty of reasons to maybe not love them so much. But I hope that people have taken away, you've seen we're all at 10 plus years experience within the industry, but we're all still with the trial master file, right? And so that's something that's really exciting for me, because I know when I joined, a lot of people, including myself, looked at the trial master file or the position I was in as more of like entry level, get your foot in the door, and then move on to a career as a CRA or a project manager or project director, whatever you want to be. But there's lots of opportunities within the clinical research space, especially in the TMF space as well. I think that really, to kind of introduce the topic of the day and the career ladder, is largely due to changes in regulation and how we manage the trial master file. Years ago, when we had primarily paper trial master files, the TMF management department was probably a lot more passive, meaning we were often just given tasks to do, right? It's like, hey, here's some documents to file. Can you put them in this paper file for me? Oh, I need the paper file. Can you give me the paper file? Obviously, there was a little bit more going on behind the scenes than just that, but a lot of people kind of have that mindset when it comes to the trial master file is, oh, I need you to file and review some documents. But as we've seen regulatory expectations change around managing the trial master file and implementing eTMF platforms, we've really seen careers in the TMF space evolve as well. So yes, of course, the core function of understanding document quality, if you remember back, just to plug day 2, when we talked about those technical skills of reviewing documents, right? That's still a core function of the trial master file, making sure that it's complete and of good quality. But with the emergence of eTMF technology, e-signatures, metadata expectations, audit trails, metrics, and reporting, there's a lot more management that's involved with the actual trial master file, right? Who's going to send out those metrics? Who's going to analyze those metrics? Who's going to provide access to the systems? Who's going to configure the naming conventions? Who's going to make changes to the trial master file if a document was filed in the wrong location? Who's going to be reviewing the documentation? Who's going to kick off TMF QCs? Who's going to manage the TMF plan, right? Lots of questions that we can ask ourselves, and a lot of those responsibilities are going to fall within the TMF space. Probably not all on one individual. Now, there's probably some of you out there that are a team of one and you wear many different hats, and I salute you for that. Hopefully you don't have tons of studies to manage, because that could get very complicated very quickly. But all these changes have really led to the evolution of what a TMF professional is, the things that we're doing. And there really is a space for everyone depending on the skill set that you want to see shine. We have some things that are more behind the scenes that Meredith and Tony will touch on, and myself as well. We have things that are more front facing, where you're actually leading conversations and leading meetings and developing implementation plans. So we're going to talk about some of those. So instead of kind of continuing to tease that, I know as we were talking about the TMF career ladder and we were planning this session today, there's lots of different roles, right? And they're often called maybe slightly different things from organization to organization, but we're each going to highlight a few roles that we have found important or that we find interesting within the TMF space. So I think I'm going to have Meredith share a few of hers. Tony will share a couple of his, and then I'll have some of mine as well, just so we can kind of talk about some of those roles. Because I think a lot of people still don't understand that there's more than just the document quality reviewer. So we do want to be talking about these roles just to give some ideas. But of course, if you have questions, comments, anything coming through as we're kind of chatting with one another, please let us know. So Meredith, I'll turn it over to you if there's a couple roles that you'd like to highlight.
Sure. Thanks, Ben. So as Ben said, there are several roles within the TMF career ladder. One that I thought we could mention was a TMF consultant role. They're considered kind of an expert. You have some experience in TMF, expert in guiding clients and review of SOPs to ensure compliance and efficiency. They're able to provide like a strategic guidance to optimize TMF processes and best practices.
Yeah, I love that. I love you're talking about kind of that strategic approach, right? As a consultant, that knowledge that's needed to really help guide other organizations, right? I think a lot of times we view TMF professionals as very siloed within our own organization, right? Like we support our studies, our teams, but there are roles outside of organizations, right? Like you mentioned, maybe an independent consultant or you work for like LMK. We do offer consultant positions, right? Where we work with various clients to help them optimize their TMF processes, as you mentioned. So I really appreciate you kind of thinking outside the box there with that consultancy, because I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize there is a demand for, right? Of how can I come in and kind of help organizations? Because I think a lot of organizations don't know what they don't know, right? And they're kind of confined to their own thoughts, their own ideas. And so that outside perspective, as you mentioned, can be very helpful. So I appreciate you sharing that one. Is there another role that you'd like to discuss before I let you pass the torch on over to Tony?
Sure. So another role would be like a system administrator, or maybe you've heard system admin. So they're more on the technical support side of things. So we have all of our eTMF systems, right? So they'll be involved in managing user access. They're often the person on the team who will handle like document deletions to ensure that the integrity and security of the eTMF system. So overall technical support and maintain the functionality of an eTMF system.
Yeah, I like that one as well. So kind of the opposite of the consultant, right? It's maybe a little bit more internalized in the sense of maybe they're not the person like front facing, engaging. They're kind of the problem solver, their technical side of things. So maybe, I like the system admin side of things. It's despite my job, I am truly a little bit more of an introvert at heart. And so sometimes I do like those days where it's just like, tell me the task to do. Oh, grant access. Let me review. Let me get my checklist of things. I love that. So yeah, a little bit more of a technical piece as well. If maybe you're more technology focused instead of maybe process or people focused. So really appreciate that. Tony, I know there's a few you wanted to chat about as well. So I'll hand over things to you for your roles.
Thanks, Ben. So the one role that I think most of us start in would be a daily QC reviewer. And in that role, oftentimes we hear it described differently, whether you're a TMF support analyst, a doc manager. A lot of companies have different names for the similar role. Basically, you're working daily on Alcoa standards, good document practices. We hear that a lot. Always looking at all the standards of the document, looking for signatures, pagination, knowing where to look at the document, and getting used to certain documents is a challenge. And especially like Ben, when you said a lot of times we're switching through studies. And so as we're switching through studies, we're not always seeing the same documents, or maybe the template or format is different. So it takes a little getting used to, and you need to acclimate yourself. So a lot of times people ask us, what do we do for a living? And it's hard to explain because most people think we're drug reps, and ultimately we're not. I tell people that we work in quality assurance on the document side of drug development. And for me, that seems to, people generally understand from there what we do. As a day-to-day quality or QC reviewer, I always tell people one of the most important things is to be available. In a remote world that we're in right now, a lot of people work all day on red. It's not that I've never done that, but being available for your team is something that allows cohesiveness of the TMF that a daily QC reviewer needs. There are a lot of times where small little things can be caught. And if you're available for your team, you can either share that in a group chat, or if it's specific to an individual, you can reach out, say, hello, I noticed this, because that person might be doing 40 more documents the same way. And, we have to know that we're here for one another. So be available is something I always talk about. And in the daily QC reviewer role, one of the things I think is very important is when you get to the end of your day, it's not something you have to do, but it is something that I do, is create an outline for your studies for the next day. Know where you're left off, know what's priority for the next day. Maybe you worked in one area for a long time the day before, and it's important to get back to a different area tomorrow. So I like to create an outline as a daily QC reviewer. So yeah, that's that role.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, I appreciate kind of the bonus attributes that you've mentioned of how to be successful in that role and what it takes. And I think you've talked about some of the technical skills of quality standards, Also maybe some of the more soft skills of like adaptability and just availability. And I think it's kind of nice to see the conversations that we've seen throughout the week for Career Week kind of develop into the conversation of, all right, here are the positions. Now you can see which position requires which skills, right? And so for me, it's so interesting when you get to a conference with a lot of TMF professionals, or you work in an organization that has different roles like system admins, document reviewers, or managers. I think you see the differences in working styles and just kind of how people operate. And that's always been so fascinating to me. I think at the core, as you mentioned, it's kind of that attention to detail, those Alcoa principles. We all have that, but we're not all comfortable getting on a camera. We're not all comfortable, developing TMF plans or processes. Maybe we're more technically focused with like the system admin stuff. So thanks for sharing that role. I appreciate it. I know you had one other that you wanted to highlight, so I'll stop yapping and let you talk about it.
Sure. The other role is a TMF lead. And you kind of mentioned that, we're not all comfortable getting on the screen. As a lead and working with my peers, a lot of times I've asked a lot of questions. And I do encourage people to present on the call not to be afraid, because it's that opportunity to get your answer. It's that opportunity to network with your peers on a team call. Your project managers are there. They can also either help or get the information, offline. So that's always a goal. As a TMF lead, I found that one of my biggest roles is to identify trends. And a lot of times as we're reviewing blocks of documents, if we see an issue that's a trend, or maybe even a filing trend, maybe it's in the wrong artifact, or we're not sure what the artifact should be, reach out to your PM, reach out to your staff, make sure you get the answer before it becomes larger than it is. So that's important. The other thing too, like I always say, be available, but part of being available as a TMF lead is to explain your solutions in detail. Don't leave people guessing. I don't ever write a quality issue without it being very descriptive. People shouldn't have to read your quality issue and wonder what you mean. A lot of times you'll see people who are a little bit afraid of over describing, but to a certain degree, when you're TMF lead and you're filling people in, you don't want to keep them guessing. You want to make sure that they're able to understand. And another part of the TMF lead role would be to do gap assessments and TMF oversight reviews. Those are commonly done quarterly in TMF, and you're working alongside, again, your team, usually, supporting your PM. During my oversight review experience, it is supporting your PM, and it's the last piece to following up on your gap assessment. And if you're wondering what a gap assessment is, that is an opportunity not just to look for missing documents, but in today's world, we're looking at the EDLs, the essential document list. We're looking at milestones. What should we expect by now? So let's say it's our first quarterly review and we're missing a document. Is that milestone, has it occurred? Perhaps we don't have that yet, but we know that we're certainly going to begin a study looking for, 1572s, FDS, and those things come up in a gap assessment, of course, but some of the missing documents might be, we might have a submission, but we don't have the approval. So that's normal. But one of the things that I think TMF University, which was created by LMK, brings up is that part of being a lead in TMF, whether you're a PM, indexer, QC reviewer, it's making sure that we're inspection ready daily. We're not waiting for the day that somebody says, oh, we're having an internal audit or we're having an external audit. When you get that email, make sure you're following up with your PM and, asking what will be the priority. Daily as a TMF lead, we do have priority documents, and we want to make sure that we're addressing those first and making sure that they're correctly filed. And ultimately, as a TMF lead, you're ensuring that the life cycle of the TMF is one that is sound and, again, inspection ready.
No, love that. And I know we have some comments coming in. Somebody was just confirming, yeah, milestones, are they correct? Those are the types of things that we're looking for as a lead. And I appreciate, Tony, the depth that you went into there related to that TMF lead position. And hopefully people have kind of seen kind of the differences in more of a document reviewer type role, where you're really focused on good documentation practices versus more of a TMF lead position, where you're really more in kind of a higher level, I don't want to say higher level because that sounds a little, but your role is a little bit more involved with the day-to-day operations of the study. You're ensuring, like Tony mentioned, expected documents are tracked, milestones are correct. We're following up on gap analysis and quality issues. There's a lot more that goes into that. And I think someone has asked, which role is best suited for candidates who have over 10 years of clinical research experience, but limited exposure to the trial master file. And so for me, something that I'm pretty passionate about in the TMF space, and Tony and Meredith, please feel free to kind of join in, is that I think from a leadership perspective, often the folks who are the best leader in the TMF space do have some level of TMF understanding, right? They're not necessarily so like process and efficiency focused, meaning they only want to make process as lean as possible. They want to make sure as an organization, obviously we want to be successful financially, but that's not their main priority, right? It's understanding what the trial master file is, the purpose of the trial master file. And so for this question, if you have limited experience in the trial master file, that doesn't mean you can't be successful in a TMF lead, consultant, or manager position, but I do encourage people to educate themselves on the trial master file. Lots of folks interact with the TMF as a TMF reviewer, right? They're looking at completeness checks. They're creating documents so they understand the quality expectations, but maybe they don't understand the nuances of an actual TMF professional, right? So they don't understand what it takes to analyze and report metrics from a TMF perspective. They may not know the language. So I tell people it's best to educate yourself. I know Tony's mentioned TMF University that LMK offers. There's also tons of information that's out there that's publicly available for people to kind of get the foundational concepts. So if your experience is limited, I think with 10 years experience, you could probably look beyond that kind of initial document owner role. You may be in more of like an associate TMF lead type position because you probably have a lot of the skills, as mentioned in other I want to say courses, other discussions this week in Career Week, you probably understand how to deliver difficult messages, right? That's something we have to do as TMF folks all the time as a lead is like, hey, this isn't the greatest news. You probably have those interpersonal skills with communication. You probably have the general knowledge of just clinical research. That's a huge barrier for a lot of people is understanding how to work in a regulated environment because you can't do things you want to the way you want to do because regulation doesn't allow you. So that does give you that edge. So I tell people, just because you have no TMF experience doesn't mean you can't come into maybe a slightly elevated or more senior role within the TMF space, so long as you kind of have that core foundation and understanding of what the TMF is. So I'd say somebody with 10 years experience could probably be successful in a TMF lead type position. If you're more technically focused, system admin could be something that's great. If you're really technically focused, you could even be a consultant or implementation specialist. From like a TMF perspective, maybe with a vendor that could work as well. But I know I've been yapping, and sorry, Tony and Meredith, I have that bad habit. I think it's from being the education lead of just talking and talking. But any kind of different opinions or confirmations, anything y'all would like to share?
I can go. I always like to tell people that there's true wisdom in knowing what you can do and knowing what you want to do. So I have been a TMF manager, but when I came over to LMK, I wanted to start in a reviewer role. I wanted to be able to see all sides of the company first. And, after, I think it was after 2 years, I was promoted to a senior analyst and, set myself up for an opportunity then to move into an assistant PM role. And right now, I think that, a lot of times people are wondering what they should do. I would say familiarize yourself with the different roles. There might be two things that are like great for you, but you might read the, job description and think, do I really want to do this? And then you read the third one and you're like, this is kind of what I would rather do, and then basically you can self-promote yourself after that. So definitely, look at all the roles and decide, what do you really want to work on? From a day-to-day basis, TMF is, there are a lot of specific things to look at, and we definitely want to make sure that we're treating everything with that, like we say, quality assurance. So again, I would just say, basically always know that wisdom is knowing what you want to do rather than what you can do.
Love that. Much more practical advice than mine. So appreciate it, Tony and Meredith. Was there anything that you'd like to add?
Sure, I think it's great. Thanks, Ben and Tony. And I think I would agree, and maybe just add, the 10 years is fantastic. I think that's in clinical research is really awesome because regardless of what department you may have worked in, even you just have the knowledge and sort of the language of the industry, which is really good and I think helpful. And that helped me when I started at LMK as a TMF support analyst. I came in with several years' experience in clinical research and then just was able to grow from there.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Meredith. And thanks again to the two of you for helping that one. And Meredith, I might actually turn it back right on to you because I think you talked about the consultant position here. So Belinda's asked, which TMF roles would provide us the experience to be a TMF consultant. And so I may change the question a little bit because it may not be a specific role that helps you to become a consultant. So it may be certain skill sets or things that you should be comfortable with. So I'll allow you to kind of approach it whichever way you want. And then Tony and I, if there's anything we want to add, we'll add. But since you kind of talked about that role, I figured you might be the best person to start our conversation.
Sure. So roles for experience as a TMF consultant. So I do on several of my study teams. I work with TMF consultants, and as we said, they're often sort of an expert, and they're able to provide guidance. So here at LMK, we provide guidance to our clients on procedures and processes. So as far as roles to give you experience for that, I think, roles within clinical research and then especially TMF for consulting on TMF would be really important. So anywhere from, a QC reviewer, an auditor, and then a study lead. So kind of working towards that knowledge and becoming an expert in the field.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think for me too, one of the things with consultancy is that it really varies, right, from project to project. You may have a consulting project that's focused on implementation of an eTMF platform. That consulting obligation will be very different, most likely, than an organization that wants to help you create or wants you to help them create a new document QC process, right? For who's responsible for what. So the consultancy really just depends. So you could be someone that's been a system admin for years, right? And you could do well as a consultant, maybe in the system admin space or system implementation, but you may struggle with more process development and quality focus depending on your skill set. So, that's not to say I think all consultants have to have the exact same skill set and exact same career path, because you could have consultants that are very focused within these vendor organizations, right, where they are the consultants for implementation more specifically. And then you could have an LMK type organization that has a bit more diversity in the consulting that we offer, from process development to the system implementation support, or just kind of general overhauls of departmental expectations. So again, kind of as Meredith mentioned, it's really continuing to widening your understanding of what the TMF space is and what the expectations are of the trial master file. And for me, one of the biggest things as a consultant is when they're able to kind of address the why. You can, of course, tell people how to do something all day long, but if you can't really explain to them why you're providing this advice, the regulatory expectation, the kind of industry best practice or accepted method for doing something, I think you maybe lose a little bit of credibility with folks, right? Because it's like, oh, I'm just telling you to do this just because I think it's the best way to do it. So kind of having that background as well will be helpful. And you'll get those skills really with any of the roles in the TMF space, right? As a document reviewer, you could provide really great insight into probably document review processes, right? If somebody wants you to update, hey, can you help us update our process for document submissions and document review? You could probably do that better than someone who's been a system admin for the past 5 years. So there's no specific role. And that's one thing I do like about the TMF space, is that you get different opportunities to kind of figure out, as Tony mentioned, what's interesting to you, right? Like you might have the skill set, but is it really that interesting? Do you enjoy doing it? So great question there. And Tony, was there anything you kind of wanted to add in summary? You don't have to, don't feel obligated, but just I know you haven't yet.
No, I really think you touched on it. I mean, one of the biggest things is, asking what role you can fulfill. We're talking about the ladder today. Where are you at with the ladder? I think so many of us came in as either QC reviewers, doc managers. Two words for a long time were interchangeable. If you've already done that role and you have an understanding of the TMF, I think it's very common to come in as an associate PM, I would recommend. Simply because at that point, if it's a new company and you're working with new peers, it would be a great opportunity still to have that support from a PM next to an associate PM. So to me, that would also be, if you have advanced knowledge, a great role to start in. I think the thought is, I always want to go to the biggest role. To me, it's a good idea sometimes to go with the associate role and then self-promote, because at that point you're always gonna have help from your peers, but in an associate role, you generally are going to be buddied up with a PM who is still going to kind of help you set things up. Create your RAID log, create your Q&A log, basically maybe even assist you on your first couple of calls with the client and the sponsor. That's pretty common. So associate PM role or even daily QC reviewer, just depending on where you're at, would be
No, I love that. And there's one thing you mentioned. I see we have another question coming up, and I'll get to that one in just a second. But I did want to selfishly maybe talk about the roles that I had in mind. And Tony, you kind of mentioned as a lot of people have pretty high aspirations, right? They want to be in a leadership position. They kind of want to move up this career ladder. And I know we have kind of framed it as a career ladder, right? Like we want to get to the next step perhaps. And that's not always everybody's intention or goal. So, for folks, somebody that's asked the question, for 10 years experience, what role is best for me? And as Tony kind of mentioned, what's interesting to you? Can you find satisfaction as a document reviewer? Do you like to be kind of in the details and review of things and issuing quality issues and following up on those? Or are you more technical and like the system admin side of things? Or are you someone who likes fostering relationships between, CROs and sponsors, or yourself and clients? And so I did want to kind of mention some of the kind of aspirational roles that are available within the TMF space. And that's going to be more of your TMF managers, your directors, into your kind of executive leadership. So those roles are really going to be helpful in fostering a positive relationship, right, between your organization and others. Usually they're externally facing a lot of times, as well as often responsible for developing internal talent. So TMF managers may be drafting TMF plans. They may be handling risk escalation from clients. They may be handling internal escalations about performance issues. They're managing individuals a lot of times and kind of helping manage their resourcing and workload. They're reviewing financials and budgets a lot of times that are related to the study. So there's a lot more technical skill involved there. So a lot of times TMF managers have to be good with not only fostering external relationships, but developing internally those individuals as well, and handling those difficult conversations, because we all make mistakes, right? We don't ever want to confront anyone with those mistakes because it always seems maybe a little bit negative, but it's an opportunity to learn. And beyond those manager positions, you have more of the departmental leadership, right? Your directors, executive directors that are responsible for the kind of financial performance of the organization. So they're looking overall, what are our margins within our department? Are we meeting expectations? From a process perspective, are we as efficient as we could be? As we've implemented a new system, are we seeing the benefit to that system? So they have a lot more oversight and reporting to executive leadership. Now, a lot of people maybe don't want to be at that level, right? There's a lot of responsibility for departmental oversight and financial responsibility, but maybe they do want to support those within their organization from a manager position. That's one thing I loved. I think it's what really helped me to realize I love kind of education and training, is because when somebody learns a new skill, or you kind of see that light bulb click for them, it's like that aha moment. There's nothing greater, right? And there's one thing, people don't love the trial master file. And one of my favorite things is to make people maybe dislike it just a little bit less. They don't have to love it at the end of the day, but if I can make them understand at the end of the day the trial master file, that's a win for me. So that's kind of my passion from a TMF manager perspective. So yes, there's also kind of more organizational leadership roles. We've seen kind of study leadership with TMF leads, TMF managers, even organizational leadership with TMF managers and directors. We've seen more of kind of behind the scenes and technical and technology with those system admins. So there really is a little bit for everyone. And I did want to just plug those two, because I know we're kind of approaching the end of our time together with about 10 minutes left, but I did just want to mention those because they exist as well. And I know, as Tony mentioned, there are a lot of people who have that aspiration to have that managerial or director title, and they do exist within the TMF space. Absolutely. This is one of my favorite questions, and it may be a summary from what we've heard throughout the week, right, of skills and knowledge that we need. But is there a common trait that TMF professionals share? Do you think there's a particular trait that has helped you? So kind of a two-part question here, I guess. And what I'll say is maybe Meredith, if you'll handle the first one, do you think there's a common skill that most TMF professionals have? And then Tony, once kind of Meredith goes through, I'll turn it over to you to say, is there has been a skill of yours that has been most helpful to you? So Meredith, I'll let you start, and then Tony, you can close us out.
Okay.
Sure. So I think there are some common skills among TMF professionals. One, everyone seems to have very good attention to detail. That's a must. But I think just in general, when you work in clinical research, you want to have, an interest in clinical research, the development of new medications and treatments. And, in addition to good attention to detail, I would say, kind of like working, and we do a lot of work in spreadsheets and some data analysis, and you'd want to have sort of a willingness to follow procedures and regulations.
Oh, I love that. And then Tony, I'll turn it over to you. Has there been a particular skill of yours that's been very helpful?
I mean, I would agree with what we've been hearing is to be detail oriented, but one of the big things for me would be to be solution oriented. If you're not sure of something, take the time to look through your index, take the time to look at similar documents, perhaps in the library of your eTMF. And when you're ready to approach, whether it be your PM or a peer, have an idea of where you want to go with it. So solution oriented, I think, is a really great trait to have. Also for me, teaching. I enjoy helping the people that I work with. If ever I come across a series or block of documents, I'm not going to be issuing a bunch of QIs when I know that person, they know what to do. Perhaps it's a new study. Perhaps it's just, a document that was decided by that particular sponsor that they don't want it there, but the last sponsor did. So I definitely take the time out of my day to, message my peers. When they ask me questions, they want me to look at documents. I look at them for them. So definitely the two things I would say is, for me, be solution oriented. And if you enjoy teaching, there definitely is a space for teaching in TMF. And I would also say, for somebody asking, what is the best trait? There are many hats in TMF. It might not seem that way, but there truly is. And the longer that you're in it, you're going to be able to identify the hats that you want to wear.
Yeah, and I think for me, some things that jump out are just, and this is what we are trying to do at LMK, right? And the purpose of Career Week is to kind of change the perception of the trial master file. And for so long, we have been viewed as very passive, right? We're kind of the yes people. We need you to do this. Yes, go do that. And so I often tell people coming into the TMF space, you have to be comfortable sometimes with adversity, meaning there's going to be difficult situations. The TMF is not loved by a lot of people. They don't want to deal with it. You're kind of that annoying pest in their ear telling them to do something and they don't want to do it. So you're going to be ignored. So you have to be comfortable, if you want a position that's kind of externally facing, being that pest and being that person that's constantly following up on something, which kind of ties into my second comment that I wanted to make, is just the approach that we can take and being transparent. That's been very helpful for me in my career, is by making the statements that I just made and acknowledging reality, right? I think it's a disservice to yourself and organizations to always sell things. It's going to be great. We've changed this process. We've implemented this new system. It's going to be wonderful. It might be. It might also be terrible right here at the beginning, right? And we need to acknowledge that people will struggle. We need to acknowledge that people don't love the trial master file. And at the end of the day, we don't need them to love the trial master file. But somebody did leave a comment. It's understanding the importance of the TMF in the grand scheme. And that's really what we're after, right? What is everyone's role with being involved with the trial master file? So that's been something very impactful for me, and kind of the self-exploration journey I've been on in recent years is, how do I really help people to overcome this adversity towards the trial master file? And I don't want to do anything with it. I know some other folks have put some comments in that we can kind of see that aren't really questions, but did want to acknowledge it. Roles are very different from organization to organization. We do see that. So you may see someone as when I started, my first role was a document technician. That was the role, document technician. sounds very fancy, right? You're like, oh, what does that mean? And I essentially just review documents. It's not to belittle that role, but I was a document reviewer, a quality checker. And so roles are very different from organization to organization. What's important, I think Tony had mentioned this and Meredith as well, is looking kind of at the job description itself and what are kind of the key aspects of that role. If you're seeing a lot more like document review focus, that's probably falling under that document reviewer. If you're seeing more of the technical system side of things, that may fall under more of like a TMF lead or even system owner or system admin. And also kind of looking at the organization themselves, right? There's jobs that are within CROs. There's jobs that are available as sponsor organizations. There are jobs that are available at like IRBs that even some of the skills from a TMF perspective could transfer to. There's plenty of vendors that offer eTMF platforms that you maybe could help from a consultancy or implementation or even study owner there. So there's lots of different organizations as well. There's not just sponsors and CROs that the skills of a TMF professional would be beneficial for. So as people search for those roles, don't just limit yourself to maybe a handful of the CROs or sponsors that you might know. Look for some of those skills instead when you're doing your job search, and that can be helpful too. Let's see. I know we got, just doing a quick time check here, we've got about 5 minutes. So I'll see if we have any last questions coming in, if they'll pop up here. If not, I think we can maybe, yeah, just system admins, differences in some of like the business admin versus system admins that might be available. So yeah, there are differences in roles there. All right, not seeing anything else come through, which is totally fine. But if we do have questions, comments, or anything after the fact, please let us know. And this is our last day. So I did want to say a thank you to Meredith and Tony for your time today. LMK is also excited. We're going to have some services launching here soon, to help people in their career journey. Because as mentioned in some of the comments that we're seeing, it's difficult to navigate and understand how to prepare for interviews. How do you set yourself apart with your resume? How do you find a job? What skills are necessary? Oftentimes we're asked the question of how do I build my skill set to be a TMF professional if I'm not put into the role, right? And so what we're looking to do at LMK is really offer opportunities to network and engage with LMK to better define your skill set. So when you're interviewing, the skills that are transferable. Maybe it's not directly related to the TMF, but it does transfer, or how to highlight your experiences as a system admin. So many people short sell themselves in interviews. And once I actually have hired them or worked with them, and they're like, oh yeah, I've done these things. I'm like, why didn't you tell us this before? Oh my gosh, this would have been like so great to know. So be on the outlook for an official launch from us for some career services. We are really excited to break ground there with everyone and offer this as a continued service to, again, grow TMF professionals and really be kind of the leads within organizations, moving from that passive approach to much more proactive. So again, this is concluding. Somebody had added, just adding those TMF keywords in the search and your LinkedIn profile can also be very helpful. So I appreciate the engagement that you all are having with one another. But thank you to everyone. This concludes our first ever career week. I think this will be something that we'll continue to bring back. The cadence to be determined. Monthly might be a little bit too much, but yearly might be the right thing. I know we're trying to time this kind of when we were thinking about it. It's like, it's kind of back to school season, right? So let's talk about education. Let's talk about careers and excitement. So be on the lookout. Again, further communication coming for us for career development. But just a huge thank you to everyone on the LMK side that made this possible, and to those of you attending that have also made this possible by engaging. We really appreciate it. So again, thanks Meredith, thanks Tony for your time and dedication. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day, has a fantastic weekend. And if you do need to reach out, we're always available. You see some stuff scrolling across your screen for more information. Just let us know how we can be of service. But thanks everyone, really appreciate you.
Thanks everyone. Thanks Ben, thanks Meredith.
Thanks everyone.